my guys, gals and non-binary pals, and welcome to a new video from Them Fatales. I'm Alicia, my pronouns are she, they.
And I'm Raven, my pronouns are she, they. And in this video we wanted to explore the long history of misogyny and sexism in the medical community and how it has evolved over the millennia, from the hysteria of ancient Greece to the experiences of many women to this day who seek healthcare for the problems they are facing and are ignored.
But before we get into it, if you find any value in the work that we do here, you can check out our Patreon to support us making more videos like this in the future. Given the topics that we touch upon, YouTube is not extremely supportive of us, but you can directly make a difference. If you can afford it and want to do so, thank you.
Now, back to the topic at hand. A recent survey of 2,400 women found that 83% of them had felt they had experienced gender discrimination when accessing healthcare. And this problem doesn't just come from male doctors who dismiss the experiences of women. The problem is systemic, with sexism baked into the fundamental processes of medical practice, with female doctors perpetrating exactly the same issues as their male counterparts.
If you are female identifying or assigned female at birth and you're sat at home feeling like this has happened to you or might have happened to you, then I just wanted to start this video by saying you're not alone. And hopefully what we tell you today can help you understand how the system works and use that information to get the care that you need. I say all of these as someone who has struggled for years to get access to healthcare that I knew I needed, but I was always gaslit into thinking that the problem must be somewhere else, whether it was my weight or my mental health.
From the 19th century up until the 1950s, hysteria was diagnosed as an actual, recognized medical condition which sufferers would exhibit physical symptoms as a result of poor mental health and emotional anguish. While it was thought at that time to affect both men and women, its roots are entirely sexist in nature. The word itself derives its origins from the Greek word for uterus, hystera. Although the word hysteria was not actually coined until much later, it makes a lot of sense that the womb would be recognized as a source of pain and discomfort for women. Menstrual cramps and PMS were as much of a thing 5,000 years ago as they are today. The first accounts of hysterical symptoms, those being uncontrollable emotions and unruliness, loss of appetite for both food and sex. Paradoxically, an appetite for too much sex can be found in ancient Egypt as early as 1900 BC, where it was believed that wombs were a troublesome organ that could affect much of the body. Honestly, it sounds like they almost got it right. All hail Bastet. It wasn't until the 4th or 5th century BC when the ancient Greeks came up with the concept of the wandering womb, where the uterus was seen as some kind of parasitic being that must be satiated lest it creates mischief by applying pressure to other organs around the body. Wandering womb syndrome was found to be particularly common in both the childless and those who had lost their husbands, by which if the womb remained empty for too long after puberty, then it would start to rebel. Therefore, a prompt marriage and bedding was prescribed to young women, and other treatments involved wafting nice smells at the entrance of the genitalia to lure the womb back to its rightful place. The idea of a wandering womb was thankfully debunked rather quickly. Yet the idea of hysteria, of women's issues, persisted over the millennia, giving way in medieval times to possession by the devil whenever any woman exhibited any behavior outside of being a dutiful and obedient wife. By the 18th century, as medicine was starting to get a little bit more defined and rigorous, demonic possession gave way to hysteria being seen as a nervous disorder and no longer only reserved for women. It was, however, still seen as a feminine disease, so men who exhibited hysterical symptoms were seen as effeminate or homosexual. By the 19th century, women were actually seen as the ideal patient by the medical community, with a vast majority of case studies in medical journals being in reference to women and especially hysteria. They were subjugated to a plethora of treatments, including bloodletting and even hysterectomies. As these treatments proved more and more unfruitful, physician Jean-Martin Charcot became increasingly convinced that the physical symptoms that women were suffering from were actually caused by psychological issues that manifested themselves in the body, and attempted to define it medically as a real disease. George Baird, who incompletely catalogued over 75 symptoms of hysteria, remarked that almost any ailment could fit the diagnosis. You see, modern medicine can basically be thought of as someone having decided what makes a healthy human body, and then any behavior or condition that falls outside that definition is a disease and something that needs correcting. But who gets to decide what a healthy human being is? What is normal? Who are we kidding? It's white men. White men are the bastion of peak physical fitness, and everything that isn't a white man is considered sickly and frail.
What does eugenics have to do with medical misogyny and women's medical access? Well, not to sound too repetitive, but one of the cleverest things that the white patriarchy has spent centuries refining is the good old war strategy of a divide and conquer. Because if two minorities are busy fighting each other, they will not team up to come burn you down. So, when you hear about the incredible history of bad medical experiences by white and black women alike, one could be distracted into thinking this was not an intersectional issue. Only on the matter of fertility, the only thing in common for women is that they hardly managed to get their own will to matter. Black women were for a long time coerced in different forms of sterilization, while white women were fighting to get hysterectomies and be denied them. In both cases, the patriarchy of old white men had ascribed to them the meaning: women are the source of progeny for the growth of the race. So black women needed to have fewer children, or they'll take us over. And white women needed to have more. And who cares about their endometriosis? Their uteruses belong to the race. Welcome to eugenics, the theory that intelligence and other personality traits are genetically determined and therefore inherited. Eugenicists advocate the rational control of reproduction in order to improve society. That developed in two ways of implementation: positive eugenics, to encourage the breeding of superior citizens, and negative eugenics, to prevent socially undesirable people from procreating. In a white patriarchal society as the one in America at the birth of this well-disproven pseudoscience, the superior citizens were the white Anglo-Saxons, the old stock Americans, and the undesirable were all that were other. And nothing embodied other better than black people. And these happened to Native American communities as well, in possibly a more horrific way.
Over the 6-year period that had followed the passage of the Family Planning Services and Population Research Act of 1970, physicians sterilized perhaps 25% of Native American women of childbearing age, and there is evidence suggesting that the numbers were actually even higher. Some of these procedures were performed under pressure or duress, or without the woman's knowledge or understanding. The law subsidized sterilizations for patients who received their health care through the Indian Health Service and for Medicaid patients, and Black and Latino women were also targets of coercive sterilization in these years.
In both cases, the people who had to be controlled to reduce or multiplicate the population were those who could give birth. At the turn of the century, the birth rate among foreigners was double that of American-born women. The birth rate among American whites and old stock declined, and President Theodore Roosevelt made the issue the centerpiece of his reform agenda. One of the president's extracurricular campaigns was to preach against low birth rates, against small families, willful sterility, what he called race suicide.
Illustration shows contrasting views of population growth. The idle stalk on the left has little to do as the upper class chooses not to make babies, whereas the strenuous stalk is being worked to death by a population explosion among the lower class. Willful sterility is, from the standpoint of the nation, from the standpoint of the human race, the one sin for which there is no atonement.
I'll translate. White women, you need to pop white, healthy children till you drop, because all those foreigners, all those poor people are doing it anyway, and their population will overtake us. Speaking of overtaking, wouldn't it be better if their women could be stopped from procreating altogether, just as we overwork ours instead? And that is how they thought of removing reproductive autonomy. In 1927, the American Supreme Court approved a sterilization order for a 17-year-old girl, and it was based solely on family records. It was decided that feeble-mindedness was hereditary, and her sexual depravity was typical of such condition. Her sexual depravity was being raped and consequently ending up pregnant. That set off a dangerous precedent for years to come, where bodily autonomy of the undesirable was taken over by government orders. And of course, the definition of undesirable varied as the ruling class and race saw fit.
It is better for all the world if, instead of waiting to execute degenerate offspring for crime, or to let them starve for their imbecility, society can prevent those who were manifestly unfit from continuing their kind.
Young women begin being admitted to institutes for the feeble-minded for the sole purpose of being sterilized. Labeling a woman feeble-minded was an excuse to punish her sexual immorality. Many women were sent to institutions to be sterilized solely because they were promiscuous or had become pregnant out of wedlock. One sign of the trait was a patient's failure to display the normal aversion of a white girl to a colored man who was perhaps nice to her, indicating that the trait had more to do with sexuality than intelligence. Ironically, while the undesirables were being pressured or forcibly sterilized, white middle-class women found it nearly impossible to find a doctor who would sterilize them, to this day. The 120 formula prescribed by the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists stated that if a woman's age multiplied by the number of the children she had totaled 120, she was a candidate for sterilization. Even then, she would need the endorsement of 2 doctors and a psychiatrist. Having no children would absolutely bar a white woman from being sterilized. The dominant social message being that a healthy white woman should want to bear a child, and if she does not, she must be suffering from some mental disorder. Hence the need for the psychiatrist session to try and dissuade her from her decision. The double standard for white middle-class women and black poorer ones accidentally made the 2 groups fight each other, despite being both victims of the objectification to mere birth machines by those who get to decide who are desirables to continue the species and who are not. Like Teddy Roosevelt tried, a powerful patriarch. Since the idea that feminine beauty reflects the racial caliber became current in the 16th century, the double standard for women of different heritage became the foundation upon which, once again, the patriarchy viewed and used women's body just in function of its own perpetuation of privilege. Whereas white middle-class women had a moral duty to procreate according to positive eugenics, black poor women had to be controlled and stopped from furthering the black population in terms of numbers. So in line with what patriarchal structures do best in objectifying women, they removed consent. making it practically impossible for white middle-class women to be sterilized if they so decided, while forcing sterilization, usually through coercion, blatant lies, or threats, for black women to agree to stop reproducing and perpetrating the undesirables. And the best way we are all kept distracted from taking on the real villains is exactly by promoting a double standard that hurts the bodily autonomy of both black and white women, which have then focused on fighting the other side, perceiving their demands for either willful sterilization for white women or for rules that would promote informed consent for black women. And that is perceived as directly undermining each other's cause. Ultimately, both women of color and white women are made jump through hoops to be simply in power of their own body. Because the white patriarchy, of which most doctors through the 50s to the 80s were part of, has an interest in white women to keep having children to further the white race, while it is imperative to them to control and limit the numbers of the other, the undesirables, the minorities. I wonder, why do they fear so much becoming a minority in their own country? Are minorities treated badly? This is what really concerns me when I hear the news about the new Texas abortion laws that limit the time after conception to 6 weeks. Yes, these new laws will indeed result in more white babies, but a survey in 2018 found that 38% of all legal abortions in Texas were for women of Hispanic descent. So how are the Republican lawmakers going to ensure that these laws don't result in an increase of non-white babies? I never had a good relationship with my period. Not only for the culture of be ashamed and hide, which literally brings some cultures to shun people to outdoor huts when bleeding. For a long time, I was on the combined pill. I was more or less okay on it. It would take the pain away from periods, which was the main goal, and I never quite noticed the difference in health. At times I even lost weight. Over 35 years of age in the UK, your GP is unlikely to prescribe you the combined pill and will like to move you onto what they call the progesterone-only pill. The name is extremely wrong because it doesn't have progesterone, it has progestins or progestogens. None of them do anything like progesterone. It's just similar enough that your body will stop ovulating. So actually, despite the odd bleeding, it doesn't regulate your cycle. It blocks it. But the doctor doesn't tell you. Maybe they think we don't need to know. We don't need to make educated choices. Not sure. Anyway, I get 36 years old and same goes for me. The doctor will not continue giving me the combined pill. Only the progesterone-only pill. I am concerned about weight gain, amongst other things, and this doctor, a woman, states simply that no, it's impossible to gain weight on this. Maybe the combined, not this. Actually, progesterone makes you lose weight. Too bad again, worth repeating. There is no progesterone in contraceptive pills. I take them and immediately I start to bloat up. I am on a pretty strict diet regime at this point, but steady and unstoppable, I start gaining weight. I start fasting more often, making sure I don't eat my calories back. I'm active. I track everything to the morsel. I still gain about 6 kilograms in less than 3 months. The doctor tells me it's impossible, it's the pill, to review my eating plan. When I see a private endocrinologist 5 months later, I'm almost 10 kilograms heavier, while only eating every other day. As soon as I tell him I'm on a progesterone-only pill, he suggests I stop because that could definitely make me gain weight. But of course, why should he explain why? I do stop the pill, and it takes my body 6 months to even begin to recover from it. Still giving me the odd anovulatory cycle, which by next year brings me to think I must be premenopausal. I get incredibly long cycles, painful, terrible. I beg my doctor for a test because my body is out of control.
I can water fast and put on weight. The telephone consultation goes on for 45 minutes, where all my requests are deflected with a wait-and-see approach. When I insist, the doctor, still a woman, ironically, tries to bring my mental health in. Maybe I need a psychiatry referral, not blood works, if being unwell is such an issue for me. Maybe we should look at why that is for me. I guess she played with the fact that I have a history of bulimia. She still pushes the referral to psychiatry, because for women it's all in our heads. The psychiatry referral was given more readily than just some simple blood test to check my hormones. It's a 45-minute phone call I will never forget. I try so much to be reasonable, but I also deliver how scared I am. Nothing in my body works, but she just gives me deflection. What do you even expect to find from blood works? It's not like medicine has answers for everything. A doctor said that to me because of my cycle issues, truly. At the end of it, I pull a card I never wanted to play because it feels threatening and unfair. Yet that was exactly how that doctor made me feel for 45 minutes. I give her all my honesty and show how scared I am, and I'm just continuously deflected. I feel threatened my issues will not be considered as such. My body will keep doing bad things to me, and I won't even know why or know how to stop. It feels beyond unfair that she tries to play my mental health past issues without having taken interest in one of the dozen of physical symptoms I was asking her help for. So I did what most patients will tell you works to get yourself checked. I asked for it to be put on the record that I am unwell. I asked for tests, and she refused. 20 seconds later, she was setting up an appointment for my blood works in a month's time. I discovered from the simple values of the test what the issue is, and with enough research in patients' groups, I realized that I am still healing from damage the progesterone-only pill did to me. Ironically, prescribed by that same doctor, I recommended as safe. I know there are guidelines that are there to give everyone a fair chance to have their health taken care of. But this made me realize there is a huge issue in AIM terms if the point is being barely functional, not optimally healthy. And without these issues sorted, my quality of life and ability to enjoy anything on a daily basis was so severely affected, it made me get to really dark places. Because I am grateful for life, but knowing that the best I can hope for is coping, not health as much as my body would concede and respond to appropriate treatment, it's not a mindset anyone should get into.
It's not just when going to the GP. Women have been largely ignored by the medical research community over the last 60 years. In the 1980s in America, the Society for the Advancement of Women's Health was created to try and address this issue. Having noticed a complete lack of inclusion of female bodies in their studies, or at best, an omission of sex when displaying the results, the National Institute of Health was urged to correct this knowledge gap. The House of Congress requested an audit into the National Institute of Health to see if this issue had been addressed in 1990, and they found that a fifth of studies didn't mention gender at all of the participants, and a third said they include women but did not list how many or designate the results by sex. Because of the lack of accountability on behalf of researchers, it's impossible to know just how underrepresented women were in medical studies, but we can see for certain that they were left out of some pretty crucial ones. A study on normal human aging didn't include women for the first 20 years that it ran, because who cares what happens to women when they age, right? I mean, I'm sure nothing major happens really, does it? A study on the effectiveness of aspirin in reducing heart disease, 22,000 men, 0 women. Because women's rates of heart disease don't increase to male levels after menopause. Nope, not at all. Oh, on that note, after realizing that heart disease risk increases in women after estrogen levels drop during menopause, a study on whether estrogen HRT could reduce heart disease was conducted. They enrolled 8,341 men, no women. In fact, HRT would not be tested on women until 1991, despite being prescribed for decades. They found that the HRT that they were using was increasing the risk of blood clots and breast cancer. When women were considered for studies, they took a bikini approach, only looking at the most obvious differences, being breasts and reproductive organs. You can check this for yourself. Google the role of the hormone progesterone. You'll find explanation after explanation of how it functions for reproduction, but not in the rest of the body. If you check the Wikipedia page for progesterone, however, it has a massive list of reported functions from the studies that have been conducted in the last 10 years. Look, I know the point of science is that it's always being updated and everything's new all the time, but you'd think they'd get the basics down. After the GAO audit, the NIH formed the Office of Research for Women's Health. They noted
a pervasive sense in the medical community that many of the health issues faced by women are of secondary importance, especially those that occur solely in women, and those that occur in both men and women but have already been studied in men. When considering research into the 3 leading causes of death in all Americans, the startling realization is that most of the biomedical knowledge about the causes, expression, and treatment of these diseases derives from studies of men and is applied to women with the supposition that there are no differences.
this is particularly dangerous in example of heart disease, where the signs of a heart attack are different in women than they are in men. The most obvious of which being a sharp pain in the left arm that men experience, but women don't, leaving them to wait longer to seek medical attention and causing untold damage to their bodies. Another example of this is the way that boys and girls express both autism and ADHD. The diagnostic criteria have been, up until very recently, very male-focused, leading to a large number of undiagnosed women that only find out much later in life, denying them support for conditions that can be very difficult to manage without it. A generous take would be that women were excluded to protect them from the risks of medical experimentation. At least up until the 60s, the most likely participants of medical research were the poor, prisoners, mentally ill, and after disasters like the drug thalidomide and diethylbestrol causing birth defects and vaginal cancers, regulations were put in place. Some of these regulations we take for granted today about informed consent, explaining the risks to patients. However, some crossed the line into sexist protectionism, identifying groups that were vulnerable to coercion or undue influence that included children, prisoners, the disabled, and oddly pregnant women. This was also extended to any woman of childbearing age, excluding them from early phase drug trials. Treating women as a walking womb where their reproductive function must be protected at all costs. And how many times has a woman been denied antidepressants for a current real problem just because of the potential theoretical idea that she could get pregnant? Literally putting an idea well above and prioritized against a woman's actual present health issue. The scientific community offered 2 contradictory explanations for not including or reporting women in studies. First, that there were no significant differences between the sexes, so it didn't matter. This had not actually been researched though, and if that's the case, then why aren't women being included in the studies? It would make no difference after all. How come this was never done in reverse, testing on women and extrapolating results to men? The other excuse was the exact opposite, that men and women were so different that women would make the results unreliable and ruin the data. You would therefore have to test both sexes separately, meaning more subjects and more cost. Also, women's hormonal cycles would interfere with the results of the female participants. If this is the case, then surely it's more important to be including women in the studies. If reproductive cycles can interfere with the efficacy of drugs that much, In 2008, Congress asked for a report on progress into women's health research, which stated that while there were improvements in breast cancer, heart disease, cervical cancer, with some progress on depression, HIV, AIDS, and osteoporosis, little progress was made on unintended pregnancy, maternal mortality, autoimmune diseases, alcohol and drug addiction, lung, ovarian and endometrial cancer, uterine fibroids, endometriosis, polycystic ovary syndrome, and sexually transmitted diseases. Then there were quality of life conditions with no real research to speak of, including arthritis, chronic fatigue syndrome, chronic pain, colorectal cancer, eating disorders, fibromyalgia, incontinence, IBS, pregnancy-related issues, melanoma, menopause, mental illness other than depression, migraine, sexual dysfunction, stress-related disorders, thyroid disease, and type 2 diabetes, our good old friend. Just last December, a worrying article on The Guardian reveals that finally the UK has noticed its rampant sexism in healthcare. The UK has the largest female health gap among G20 countries and the 12th largest globally. Researchers at University College London found that women with dementia received worse medical treatments than men with the condition, made fewer visits to the GP, received less health monitoring, and took more potentially harmful medication.
The inequalities start well before women make it to their doctor's surgery. Women are routinely underrepresented in clinical trials, and medical research proposed by women for women is not allotted the same funding as medical research proposed by men for, you guessed it, men.
Carolyn Criado Perez, the author of Invisible Women, campaigned and demonstrated that healthcare is systematically discriminating against women, leaving them chronically misunderstood, mistreated, and misdiagnosed.
Sexism permeates the system, from women's pain being dismissed by their GPs to women struggling to get the menopause drugs they need on the NHS. In June 2020, a government inquiry found that an arrogant culture in which serious medical complications were dismissed as women's problems contributed to a string of healthcare scandals over several decades.
Even when doing in vitro studies, researchers were unlikely to determine if a cell had XX or XY chromosomes, even though sex differences in cells has been recorded. Just as an aside, while this is all to say that sex is important for medical research and science, that's not to say that your sex is always the same as your assigned gender at birth. While it might not be possible to change chromosomes from birth, your chromosomal sex is only important for in vitro studies for the context in which we're talking, which give limited insight on to how something works in the body. When we talk about different drug interactions or health risks with certain diseases like heart disease, almost all of these come down to your hormonal sex, which is far more deterministic of a person's biology and physiology. And that can be changed through the use of hormonal replacement therapy.
Okay, I want to start a chain about the craziest thing a male medical professional has told you as a woman. I'll go first. I was 18 years old at the time, and I was bleeding from my behind every time I'd use the restroom for like a week straight. I told the male nurse this, and his response was, "Are you sure you're just not on your period?" Sir? That is not the same hole, sir.
So I was a junior in high school, and I was going to a swim meet because I was a swimmer, and I started having horrible, severe stomach pain. I wrote it off as just having cramps because I was on my period at the time, but it got so bad that I couldn't even stand up and I couldn't talk or anything. I couldn't move. So my mom took me to the ER, and the doctor came in and was like, "Oh, you said you're on your period, right?" And I'm like, "Yeah, but these aren't period pains. This is something way worse." He didn't do any scans or anything. He just wrote it off as period pains and that I'm pretty much just a pussy. I go home still writhing in pain, and my mom feels my stomach and it's rigid. Turns out I had ovarian cysts that popped, and I was internally bleeding, and I was going into sepsis. And now I have so much scarring that I can't have kids.
3 years ago, I was in a very bad car accident. I hit black ice going 75 miles an hour with cruise control on because I didn't know not to use cruise control in the rain. I went face first into a concrete barrier, crossed 4 lanes of traffic, through an exit ramp, down a hill, got stuck on a fence in my car. Luckily, the only injury was a very smashed collarbone and fear of driving. Trauma surgery, obviously, to repair my collarbone because it was in pieces. It's now a big titanium plate with screws in it holding everything together. A few days after, I had a post-op with my trauma surgeon, and he told me 3 things. One is that the nurses were pissed they had to hold my fat arm in the air during the surgery. That's what he told me. He said it looked like a ham hock. He then said that most women get it removed, but I probably won't because I'm too fat. You can't see my collarbone, so it doesn't really matter if it's attractive or not. And 3, he kept insisting that my dad was my husband, which is disgusting.
So my husband and I got pregnant with my daughter, and she was kind of a surprise, so we just kind of assumed that getting pregnant would just be really easy. It was not. We tried for 2 years to get pregnant, and it just wasn't happening. Well, one night I was getting ready to go to the gym, and I was helping my friend load her groceries, and I just felt this excruciating pain. I didn't know what it came from. But I knew that it was like in my ovaries. After hours of just sitting in my house in excruciating pain because I don't know how to go to a freaking hospital, my husband finally talked me into going. So the ER doctor comes in and tells me, "Oh, you have a tummy ache?" And I was like, "No, my ovary hurts." And he was like, "So your tummy?" And I was like, "No, my ovary." After arguing with this doctor about my tummy issues, I had to go into emergency surgery because my fallopian tube exploded from an ectopic pregnancy.
I started taking birth control pills when I was about 18 years old. Not for the fact I was having sex, but simply for the fact that my periods were 10 days long and I was gonna end it all. So I went to the doctor at my school. We had a healthcare center. It was amazing. About the 4th time I went to get my refill, the doctor asked me when was the last time I was sexually active. I said, "Oh, I'm not. I've never had sex before." To which he said, "So you're lying?" And I said, "No, I'm using birth control pills to regulate my period." He said, "You're conning the system. You have a month to lose your virginity and confirm it at your next refill appointment." This man told me I had a month to lose my virginity. And the next time I went back to the doctor, he asked, "Did you lose your virginity?" And I said, "Oh yeah, doc, having sex all the time," like jokingly. And he was like, "This is not a joke, Tiffany." And I was like, "Sir, I just don't want to bleed anymore." And he was like, "I'm going to put in here that you've been sexually active. Make it happen." What?
While the recognition of hysteria as an actual medical diagnosis became less and less frequent, as various new conditions were discovered that could explain the unexplainable symptoms, the theoretical process by which it manifested remained. That being one where patients could convert mental and emotional distress into physical symptoms that have no real tangible cause. Psychosomatic symptoms. This meant that even when hysteria itself was removed from the DSM, or its equivalent, doctors still had an easy get out when presented with patients that they could not effectively diagnose or treat. Just say that it's stress and refer them to a psychiatrist, or prescribe antidepressants, or even a placebo. None of these helping the patients, of course, but at least the doctor could take the case as a job well done and move on to help the really sick people. I mean, to play devil's advocate and look at it from a doctor's perspective, the purpose of their job is to fix things. And in fact, they have a very particular set of skills that make them the only kind of person who is qualified to even try and fix these particular things. They're like the mechanics or the IT support of the human body. And so it's actually quite understandable that some of them really won't like it when they can't solve the problems. Women. If they're an older doctor who's been doing it for a long time, they'll be very confident in their ability as they've had years of experience and a higher success rate to back them up. If they're a new doctor, then fresh out of medical school, they might feel very assured about the fact that they've got all this cutting-edge knowledge that maybe the older doctors don't know about yet, and approach the problems with fresh eyes. And it would be quite a knock to the confidence of both these doctors to not be able to safely diagnose their patients. And as psychosomatic symptoms do have some validity to them, I mean, just look at the placebo effect or even the nocebo effect. then it can be an easy get out of jail free card. The problem is that the medical field is always updating, always moving, always growing. It can take years, even decades, for new discoveries to make their way into the textbooks that medical students learn from. And if you don't keep continuously up to date on the latest medical news, then you're going to fall behind pretty quickly. Thankfully, with the internet in the last few decades, it makes learning these new developments and studies easier than ever. So keeping up is technically possible, although much easier for those who specialize rather than general practitioners. But then again, as we've discussed, the medical research field still suffers from misogyny in how it makes these discoveries. And if the doctor themselves is misogynistic, well, there's no helping that. Female patients are often regarded as unreliable narrators due to our perceived emotional instability. If a patient seems in distress when describing her symptoms, then she may be asked if she's pregnant, or possibly hormonal. And conversely, if a patient is stoic, then the symptoms may be viewed as not as serious because us women are of weak temperaments and wouldn't be able to cope if they were as bad as we said they were. In fact, it doesn't matter how we present our symptoms, we are simply statistically less likely to be listened to than men, because the medical literature teaches doctors to do so. In a 1974 article titled "What Medical Schools Teach About Women," Dr. Marie C. Howell, the first female dean at Harvard Medical School, wrote,
Following traditional linguistic convention, patients in most medical schools' lectures are referred to exclusively by the male pronoun he. There is, however, a notable exception. In discussing a hypothetical patient whose disease is of a psychogenic origin, the lecturer often uses she, for it is widely taught both implicitly and explicitly that women patients, when they receive notice at all, have uninteresting illnesses, are unreliable historians, and are beset by such emotionality that their symptoms are unlikely to reflect real disease.
According to a 1973 survey of over 100 female students in 41 different medical schools conducted by Howell, their lectures were filled with references to hysterical mothers or hypochondriacs that the doctors must manage. In fact, some textbooks even went so far as to offer advice as to how to determine if a symptom was all in a patient's head or not, by asking if she accepts herself as a woman. By the 1980s, hysteria was removed from the DSM, but there was a new section, somatoform disorders. Somatization disorder itself required 14 lifetime symptoms from a list of 37 possible symptoms. This was later streamlined to 8 of 32 symptoms, so that's nice. Conversion disorder related to unexplained neurological symptoms such as seizures or paralysis. Psychogenic pain disorder, this may very well start to sound familiar to a lot of you at home. Eventually revised to pain disorder, described unexplained chronic pain in any part of the body. Hypochondriasis was reserved for patients with unexplained symptoms who also presented with an intense fear of being ill. And undifferentiated somatoform disorder was for any patient with unexplained symptoms that didn't fit into any of the other categories. I mean, you can see the pattern here, right? So desperate are they not to admit that they don't know, they've managed to literally medicalize not knowing into its own illness. Doctor, there's something wrong with me. What is it? I diagnose you with... These new disorders, of course, were all reported much more commonly in women, people of low income, low education, and people of color. But Raven, you beautiful, sexy creature, I hear you say, this was in the 70s and 80s. Surely things are different now. Well, guess what? There are brand new euphemisms making their way into the medical literature, such as functional, meaning a patient who presents with symptoms that look like something else but are not diagnosable as such, or the newest one, medically unexplained symptoms, often abbreviated to MUS, or as certain female patients in Sweden found on their medical records, the equivalent of BWALS, bitch with a lot of symptoms. Even beyond that, you have conditions such as chronic fatigue syndrome or fibromyalgia, essentially treating symptoms as disease. And this isn't to say to those who suffer with these conditions don't have very real illnesses. Your experience is real and you deserve all the support and care that you can get. Just that these conditions are probably as yet undiscovered or undetectable conditions with causes that can be treated, not just sudden onset chronic pain for no reason disorder. Unfortunately, even if these conditions do become medically explainable, that's no guarantee of being taken seriously. Just look at the countless women who suffer from undiagnosed endometriosis or PCOS because their symptoms are not taken seriously even though they can be easily verified.
So what can you do if you feel like you have uncooperative doctors? If you've been suffering with symptoms that can't be explained or have been told that tests came back negative, so there's nothing you can do? Well, probably the most important thing is to educate yourself. I know it can feel difficult to go against what doctors say. They're doctors after all, surely they know what they're doing. And for most part, they do. But remember that GPs, general practitioners, aren't experts. They have a foundational knowledge of lots of different things, and a good one knows when to seek expert help by referring you to a specialist. But if they don't, then become your own expert. Start reading books and medical studies to find out what the latest knowledge might be that your GP could have missed. I know for myself, reading up on all the things about progesterone that doctors don't tell you about, and finding cutting-edge research on the rare kind of hypothyroid disorder that I have, enabled me to take matters into my own hands and find the doctor I needed who would listen to me. Change your GP. Shop around. You don't owe doctors any loyalty. If the one you have isn't working out for you, then find a new one who will. You might just get lucky. If impossible, have someone come with you to the doctor's appointments at least. If you suspect sexism, bring a male friend or your husband or brother, someone who can corroborate that your symptoms are as bad as you say they are. Someone who can stand up for you if the doctor tries to fob you off. And finally, do not give up. The answers are out there. They may be being discovered right this very second. I wish you all the best of health. This video took a disproportionate amount of time to see the light of day. The research was done over months, and yet we sat on the basically finished scripts for weeks and months still. Why couldn't we bring ourselves to film and publish it? I think it's because the more we got into it, the more it was apparent that we can just highlight the issue in the system, but we're not at the stage where we can offer a real solution. Because the issue is systemic and mind. Systemic issues are rarely by chance, but put there by design. It's like in Andrew Nichols' In Time, where all of a sudden the bus ride that the day before was 2 hours, now it's 3, and people die with lack of time. It's not so much a metaphor, more so a description of the current capitalist system that is meant to break down the very same people that sustain the system, the working class. Much like most issues in society, this too comes from the capitalist system and rules that need to extract the most profit out of people, even and especially if their lives are at stake. Nai Bevan, the Labour MP who is regarded as the father of the National Health Service, never made it a mystery that he loathed the Tories, the right-wing politics putting the interest of the few with money above the simple dignity of the life of many. Not one working class person you can ask in the UK and hear they'd rather do without the NHS. And yet, a lot of them have voted Tory for the last 12 years, allowing them to bring to an all-time high the poverty and class divide of this country, in a way supposedly civilized countries shouldn't allow. The lack of funding to the NHS is meant to make it so inefficient that they will have
to bring in privatization, to save it. And we sit back, shrug when it's time to vote and make a change, think all politicians are the same, when in reality we are the ones who face the consequence of politics every day. So being apolitical or thinking like temporarily embarrassed millionaires won't ever make us rich. It will never make us jump the divide. The divide needs filling. I shouldn't have had to save money for months just to afford a private consultation with a doctor who had just to prescribe me blood tests. And yet my GP will still refuse me today the blood works to even just keep progress in check, even with my condition well recorded as the clear issue it is. If I don't go knock on the door of my private doctor and ask him for a letter to send to my GP every time, my blood will never be checked for the chronic issue that I've been diagnosed with. It's not by accident that we are kept barely functioning, that even when our issues are discovered, the supposed national average for healthy ranges keep us at best medicated enough that we appear to be within those ranges. And who cares about how we actually feel, how actually functioning we are? Why make us feel optimally when the bare minimum makes for much more placid and busy people that have their own issues to fight? So we don't have the time or energy to organize and fight the system.